It's California Edition. I'm Brad Pomerantz coming to you from Sacramento. We are joined by Bob Huff. He is the GOP leader in the California State Senate. And so I want to speak with you about our water crisis. Recently, my family and I were flying out of Sacramento to Los Angeles. Our plane was delayed because it was raining in LA. We were jumping for joy. We couldn't believe it, but it's really not enough. Am I right, sir?
You're definitely right.
Yeah. Talk to us about what's happening. You represent significant portions of LA County, the Inland Empire.
Yeah, we call it the lower desert.
The lower desert. But that's a good point. But it is a good point. We jest, but it is a desert.
It's an arid region. We bring our water in. LA brings it in from the Sierras.
Right.
We get Metropolitan Water District. Most cities bring it in Colorado, Northern California. But we bring it in. There's not enough, certainly, to take care of our needs.
And I've been to the Inland Empire, around your district. It is really hot. I mean, this summer has been scorching. And I know, for example, cities like Riverside have imposed certain restrictions on watering lawns. But in Riverside, they can't go that far or the lawns will die. It's 4 days a week. I live in Los Angeles. It's 3 days a week because we're closer to the coast. There's only so much that can be done today.
Yeah, my house is starting to look like the Capitol with brown lawns.
Right.
So when the shrubs start to go, up the watering a little bit because they're a little more to replace than just grass.
So we'll talk about a potential bond in a moment, but what can be done now? What are we doing now? What can we do now?
Well, certainly near term you can conserve more, and people need to do that. And that sounds trite, but we've done a lot in Southern California, really. But there's always more you can do. You shut the water off when you're washing dishes,
of course,
toothbrush, all that simple stuff, low flow shower heads, and all those things. But you can't conserve your way to what we really need to solve this problem. So we have to look at long term and how do you set yourselves up for the next generation, because we have doubled our population with the existing water infrastructure, and we're at the breaking point on that.
Let's talk about long term. If this were the 80s or the 90s, I think a discussion about building more above ground storage would be a non-starter. But it does seem that the conversation has changed, and even environmentalists, folks that may be Democrats, see that there is some need for more above ground storage. Am I reading the tea leaves correctly?
Well, yes and no. There's some that just don't think we need more storage.
Of course.
They'd rather get water policy right than worry about storage. Our ag guys who are having to pump more and more of the water out of their aquifers, and you're seeing the land subside, they're very concerned, and they should be. They're paying huge amounts of money just to keep their crops alive. So we have to have water storage. If you don't have water storage, you certainly can't put it back into the ground. You can't recycle it. There's a lot of things you can't do if you don't have it in the first place.
True, but do we need to look at storage both above ground and below ground?
Yes, absolutely. Any way that you can. And I would say in the last 20 years, we've become a lot smarter about the below ground storage. But there again, it's tough to get it in and it's tough to get it out. You got to trickle it in and you can pull it out through straws, but it's not like you can just open up a gate and it flows out like we do out of our reservoirs.
Right. So what's happening on the groundwater side? We'll talk more about above ground storage. There are 50 states in the union, 49 regulate groundwater and one doesn't. That's California. It seems as if there is some consensus that we need some form of groundwater regulation. Whether the state does it, the locals does it, that's up for contention. Is that where we're at, sir?
Yeah, and what you end up with property owners that think, why is somebody telling me what I can do or can't do with my property? Because the water rights go with the property. And so that's why, it's such a sensitive issue. And California, you may know, is different from every other nation.
It is.
I mean, other
states.
That too. Yeah, that too.
Right.
It's just, we're different. And our water laws are a little more convoluted than most any other place.
So is the Republican caucus on board with groundwater regulation at all?
I would say it's not a consistent,
that's fair.
It varies.
Right. Let's talk more about it when we come back. For our viewers on HLN, I want to thank you so much for joining us. For our other viewers, we'll be right back speaking with GOP Senate Leader Bob Huff. So, sir, I have spoken with some of your colleagues in the GOP, both Senate and Assembly, and it seems as if maybe there's some consensus on the groundwater side that we can have some regulation, but it really needs to be focused on the locals, that the locals will be the ones that are regulating, and that we don't want the state kind of jumping in. Is that what you're seeing in the caucus?
I would say that's fair, and I don't want to speak for the caucus in this regard.
Well, you are the leader.
There's different opinions.
Right.
Now, in Southern California, where I am, we're doing a pretty good job with groundwater. A lot of the other areas, they're not. And they don't want to, I mean, right now, you think about the ag guys that are literally mining water. They're pulling out water that's ancient water. It takes a long time to get in. But if they weren't able to do that, they wouldn't be able to keep their crops alive because we have not proactively built the storage necessary to capture the water they need.
I've spoken with one of your colleagues, Anthony Cannella, who's a member of your caucus, and he has told me horror stories. In his community, what they're saying is called subsidence.
Right.
And literally, just the ground is collapsing. It's almost like quicksand.
Yep.
And that's we're done. I mean, you can't recreate a basin for groundwater once there's been subsidence.
Yeah, you can't get the same amount of water back in there.
Right.
It's just, it's historic water. So that's kind of why we say you're mining the water.
Right.
And yet nobody wants to, in those areas, they don't want to mess with it because their alternatives are just let their crops die and then they've lost everything.
Which would be devastating to the entire state. I mean, I have read facts that this year, the impact on California will be huge. And this is just, year 3 of the drought. I mean, countless jobs lost, billions of dollars lost. This is serious.
Oh, it's real serious. In the area that I grew up in on a farm in the Imperial Valley, they get their water out of the Colorado. And they're not having the same kind of problem that we are. They've got some of the earlier grandfathered rights on the Colorado, but they're fallowing it and selling it other places. And when you start fallowing farm property, I mean, we're the #1 ag state in the nation. We're one of the top producers in the world. We export.
Salad bowl.
And so we're talking jobs, we're talking economy, California's economy, and it's all around water. So even in areas like that have their water rights, they still have to share the pain of the rest of the state to make everything work.
I want to go back to storage, if I may, and ask you specifically about what would storage look like. I speak with friends who want to be bored, but sometimes people ask you, what's happening with water? It actually did happen over the weekend at a family wedding, and I was explaining the storage element, but I didn't really know the answer to the question of, will it be new storage, or will we be expanding existing storage?
So the environmental community gets pretty exercised when you start talking about damming a stream.
Right.
And so what we're talking about in this bond is 2 different facilities.
Explain, sir.
And one is Sites Reservoir, where we would raise the dam. And so it's an existing watershed. You already have water coming in. That's pretty simple. The new one would be, Temperance Flat is the one you're raising.
Oh,
Sites
Temperance.
Reservoir is the new one. And they're taking basically a valley, damming it up on 2 ends, and then pumping the water in there. So you're not flooding river habitat or anything. It's just a valley that cows are grazing on right now.
I understand.
And so that doesn't mess up an ecosystem per se like you would if it's a riparian. So it gets across that argument. Now it costs money to pump it into there. You're going to capture some of it back when you let it back out, but that's the downside. It costs more money to operate such a system.
So presuming that there is the money there through a bond or whatever it may be, how quickly can we extend or raise Temperance Flat, and how quickly can we get sites going?
I think Sites is farther ahead when it comes to the permitting processes because you just don't have to do as much stuff, right?
Sure.
It's not like you're flooding habitat. But typically on a project that size, you're looking 8 to 10 years. So it's not a short-term fix.
What about Temperance Flat?
I'm not sure on the timing on that.
Presumably a little less.
A little less, but you remember down in LA when Metropolitan Water District did the Diamond Valley Reservoir, it was lightning fast. They did it in 8 years.
Really?
And that's lightning fast for a big project.
Tricky.
It is tricky.
It's hard to know whether, I'm sure you've heard possibly we're entering an El Nino phase, which could mean great rain or it could mean no rain.
Right.
So 8 to 10 years may be fine, but it may not.
Right.
What do we do now?
Well, what I do know is if we don't start making serious decisions now, it's not going to get any better. It will absolutely get worse.
Right.
But the El Nino exactly makes the point. Last time we had that, we had over half of our water going out to the ocean
That's the
at
frustration.
a time that if we had just the capacity to capture it, then it would be more available for times like this when we need the water.
So as we speak today, you feel as if the voters are ready?
I think the voters are ready. The question is, can the legislature come up with something other than what's on the ballot already?
We'll talk more about it when you come back. His name is Bob Huff. He is the GOP Senate leader in the state of California. My name is Brad Pomerantz, and this is California Edition.